Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. And I just want to request you to put on my slides. So I'm going to share about CSO sustainability through private sector partnerships. So please just bring these slides on. So as you've heard, my name is Maurice Omondi. I've been in this sector for some time, having worked in several organizations. Thank you very much. So I'm going to share with you about CSO sustainability through private sector partnerships. And as I was sharing that, I've been in the philanthropy sector for quite a number of years and also currently working in the private sector. So I feel competent enough to share with you some tips and ideas of how to engage in the private sector. So moving on to the next slide, please. It's just a basic definition. And just to share, when we talk about private sector engagement or private sector, what are we talking about? And here, I just want to say it's a partnership aimed at addressing the societal issues through joint efforts of CSOs and the businesses. So this is a situation where the private sector come together with the civil society organizations to address the challenges that we are facing. So it involves bringing about expertise, resources, and innovation. So the private sector is coming with a business or commercial perspective, and the CSO sector is coming up with their experience in community impact. So moving on to the next slide, when we talk about why do we have these partnerships, and what you realize that these partnerships are coming with some sort of mutual benefits. You can say that they are can be selfish, but at the end of it, it is a win-win for both sides. And these partnerships are being driven by what you can call compliance as well as push factors. So there are some things which pushes the private sector to support the social impact arm. So moving on to the next slide where you can see a bit about the compliance factors. So as in many parts of the world and in Kenya and in Africa, there are compliance factors which it can be either the law or regulations which push organizations to put some money to support social impact or environmental impact. So for example, in Kenya, the Nairobi Stock Exchange has put up ESG regulations, environmental, social, and governance regulations, which all organizations who are publicly listed in the Nairobi Stock Exchange are supposed to do. Again, in the laws in Kenya, for example, again, there's the public participation law, which requires the public sector to ensure that they are able to engage with the communities. So it's like a compliance. You cannot just do any investment without engaging with the public. There are also the issue of tax incentives, which come in, and the public sector, the private sector, they want to get tax benefits. So therefore, they have to give some money and they get some tax benefits when they give this money to the private sector. And then there are also international standards for businesses, which include the Global Reporting Initiative, like the Global Compact and the UN SDGs, which call upon partners or private sector to, comply with the social or environmental impact. And again, in Kenya and many other parts of the world, there is the requirement for environmental impact assessment as well as environmental impact and social assessment, which calls upon organizations to comply. But aside from the compliance factors, moving on to the next slide, is the push factors. So from an organizational point of view, they realize that they are looking for profit. So they're looking at how do they partner with the social, non-profits. How can they partner with them to gain profit? And how can they partner with you or partner with them to increase their brand image, so to be seen to be a good citizen? And also there is the push factor. Sometimes the shareholders, they demand that, we have to give back to the society, the investors, and even employees. They demand that as a company, we must be seen to be complying to environmental standards and also giving back to society. And then there's also the issue of market opportunities, especially for organizations that want to reach out to the underserved segments of society. So they want to reach to the rural areas, they want to give to the low-income areas, and therefore they feel that they must be seen not only to be targeting the top of the pyramid, but even the other people who have got less income. And also the issue of risk and mitigation. So as I even said when you started, the issue of COVID and even other environmental factors which have come in. So, it pushes the private sector to engage in this social impact area. So moving on to the next slide, where you can see a beautiful picture of a gentleman greeting a lady. It's just a pictorial presentation of what goes on in the mind of the non-profit. They are looking for community impact. They're looking for goodwill. They're looking for positive reputation. They're looking for brand visibility. They're looking for sustainability. While on the other hand, the private sector, they're looking for profit. They're looking for channels to distribute their products. They're looking for visibility. They're looking for compliance, customer, and even reputation. So I now want to share with you briefly about shared value, which is a concept which was, has been raised, and this is something which also drives the private sector when it comes to, why they want to, you need to understand the philosophy, why the private sector will work with you or not work with you. So the concept of shared value is a concept which kind of is a business strategy which aims to create economic value while also addressing societal challenges. So this is a concept which was promoted by some scholars like Michael Porter, moving on to the next slide, and Mark Kramer, which is basically talking about how do we work as a community towards a common good. So on one hand, we are promoting the economy, we are also promoting society, and also promoting the environment. How do these three corners, and Professor Yunus Mohammed has also talked about the 3 zeros. So they're all issues about shared value, cuts across how do you combine business opportunities, societal needs, and the company's asset and expertise. So at the middle is a shared value. So it's basically thinking about profit, people, and environment. Is thinking about your business opportunity, social needs, and even making use of the company assets. So this is also another thing which really promotes private organizations to support the private sector. So moving on to the next slide, I want to share with you some frameworks for CSO and private sector engagement. And I already mentioned a few, but even from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 17 in particular talks about partnerships for the goals. So this is a compelling factor for the private sector to go and work with the non-profits. Then there is also the environmental, social, and governance frameworks, which are becoming more and more keen, as well as the public-private partnerships. And as Evans has also spoken before, actually public-private partnerships and even financial, so the 4 Ps. But I just want to talk about the public-private partnerships, where the government invites the private sector and even the public sector to invest in social projects, and even some of them have got commercial angles, some of them have got environmental angles. But these are some of the frameworks that are available for CSO and private sector engagement. Now, I would like to move now to some practical steps of, like if you really want to start the partnership between the private sector and a non-governmental organization, what are some of the things that you need to do? So going on to the next slide about the key steps for successful cooperation, I just want to mention a few, and I also want to welcome people in the room. You have more experiences, you can chat in the box, you can share like what have you done before, what has worked for you. But what I'm sharing here is just a few tips. And one thing which is very, very critical for all of us is you need to know yourself. You need to know your needs. You need to know yourself as an organization. What are your strengths, weaknesses, as well as opportunities and even threats? What is your reputation? You need to look at, have you partnered with the private sector or businesses before? Do you need to rebrand? So as Evans was saying, like due to the large drop of income from US, and which is, when US coughs, other organizations follow. Do you need to rebrand? And then do we need to, for example, pursue certification that can make us to be visible and to have a good reputation? And when you're talking of certification, there are many organizations that do certification. In Kenya, we used to have the Viwango, although it has been a little bit dormant, but it was a very, very big move towards certification. We have the PBO authority, which gives certification for registration of NGOs. And in many parts of the continent, there are many organizations that does certification. We have Civicas, which can also give you certification. We have global organizations like Global Charity Navigator. So, if you have any of these certifications which show that you are an ethical organization, it really gives you a lot of advantages. There's GuideStar, there is Candid USA, and many others. There is, of course, even employing staff. Do you show that they have got qualifications like if they are an accountant, you have got qualifications like a CPA or certified public accountants, or do you put your audited reports to be seen and they're audited according to international standards? Do you have qualified staff doing fundraising? And there's some certification for fundraisers globally, like CFRE, International Certified Fundraising Executive. So these certifications are very, very crucial. So moving on quickly because of time, also I want to share briefly about some types of corporate partnerships. And these include course marketing, which is a collaboration between nonprofits and profit, to mutually raise their brands around some particular causes. There is the corporate sponsorships, there is volunteerism, there is in-kind giving, there is pro bono services, there is matching donation, where an organization says that if you're able to raise these funds or money from your communities, will match this. Then there is even co-branding opportunities and many more. So these are just examples, and you'll be able to get slides to to understand deeper. Then I'll just speak briefly about some of these models, which I've just shared in the previous slide, like models for private sector CSO collaboration. There is the sponsorships and the financial support that private sector can give. There is the public-private partnerships, which I already mentioned. You can also gain skills and expertise from the private sector. Instead of just asking for money, you can ask for donation in terms of time. Somebody can do for you your books of accounts, financial training. Somebody can do for you auditing, and you count that as giving in kind. So instead of paying money to bring on an auditor, you can get this support from the private sector. You can also do some joint activity, joint advocacy ideas, as well as product or service integration. So these are just a few examples of models of private sector CSO collaboration. There is a social enterprise model, which I even alluded to, which is very, very critical. And this is basically, using commercial or using business ideas or business thought to solve societal problems. So instead of just drilling, for example, instead of just drilling water and giving people a donation, you do the water, but you ask them to pay as they use. Other models which have worked very successfully, even in the cities, is where you pay some little amount of money to use maybe a public toilet. It's a social enterprise. So you are able to pay a small amount in Kenya, 10 shillings, in other countries, maybe $1 or 50 cents, and you're able to use public toilet, and they are able to maintain it. That's an example of a social enterprise model which contributes to the social good. And then it can also include shared research, and even, like now number 10, is the issue of the loans and investments. There are organizations which can also give you loans and investments so that you're able to do things. So we are no longer just going for free things, but are now going to even people giving you kind of like investments. Now, I just want to share a bit about ethical guidelines and operational principles when you are approaching this private sector. And one of the things you need to be careful about on an ethical point of view is which industries do you go to? Will you receive money from each industry, or you will be concerned about some, for example, some which are in the extractive industries, those also producing alcohol? Are they aligned to your mission? Do they ensure that you have got some mutual respect? Do they, promote sustainability in the long run? And you also have to have very clear guidelines for engagement so that you don't feel used by the private sector. And from the onset, you have to agree on how the collaboration will be communicated, because as I mentioned to you, the private sector, they're looking for branding, they're looking for visibility, but maybe on your side, you don't want that visibility to be put on your branding. So you have to agree on the onset so that you don't have any conflict along the way. And despite of the benefits and the good things which you can get from the private sector, there is also the challenges which will come across. And as I mentioned, I request other people to share even opportunities and challenges that you have come across. And some of the challenges include misalignment of objectives. You can't find an organization which is so much focused about profit, and they are focusing on maybe their goal is maybe to construct classrooms, and they want it to be very visible to the public that they have done these classrooms, or they want to do desks, but their demand may be something else different. Then there's also the issue of limited resources or expertise from one or both parties. This is a big challenge. So you might go to a private sector organization which don't have any experience about dealing with the private sector, with the civil society organizations. So you have to have like a common ground. Where do you reach in the middle? Then the issue of difficulty in measuring and communicating social impact. Sometimes the private sector, they want to see this social impact quickly. And on the other hand, the nonprofit, might take time to demonstrate that impact. But of course, there are opportunities which still exist, include leveraging on the cross-sector expertise, engaging in new markets and other opportunities. So I'm also sharing with you now a little bit about a tool you can use. You can adopt this to your situation. Like when you want to do partnership assessment, you can come up with a tool just to help you, like when you're assessing a particular private sector. So you are looking at issues like mission and value assessment, and then you give a score. If they are very much aligned, you can give yourself a score of 5. If there is a little alignment, you give yourself 1. The audience overlap. Are your target community the same? Is there some sort of like a common customers and employees? If there's some sort of alignment, you give it a score. If it is very much aligned, 5. Very low alignment, 1. Then do they have any existing philanthropic initiatives? What is their corporate reputation? And is there any existing business connections? So these are things that you look like. You can use this partnership assessment scale just when you're going to assess the nonprofits you want to go to. The private sector you want to go to. And then using that information, you make a decision. So this is just an example, but you can use your own criteria for making the final decision. Now, then briefly, this is also just some ideas. If you want to make a pitch to a private sector, whether it is just a 1-page or it's just a 1-page proposal or even a long proposal, you need to, just the same way you're doing it to bilateral donors or even high net worth individuals. But for the private sector, they'll also be looking at some things. How are you bringing the issue of recognition and visibility to them? How are you going to ensure employee engagement? These are some of the unique things which the private sector are looking for. And then there's also the issue of testimonials and success stories. So you have to tell your story. What is the success you are making so that you're able to, they can associate with you. And then, towards the end of my presentation, so remember when you're doing your sustainability roadmap, you have to have a very, very good profile. And, when you're investing to different private sector, which you have selected, you have to be very clear what are you pitching to them in terms of what is the change you want to bring about, what is the cost-benefit logic that you're bringing about. And of course, you have to have the transparency and the impact metrics. And you must have a professional board, the issue of trust. And thank you so much, Ruth Mariru, as you are sharing about the study that you did in terms of the issues which affect nonprofits and the issues of trust. There's a study we did last year, but one together with East African Philanthropy Network. And when we're doing the mapping the philanthropy ecosystem, and one of the biggest challenges that nonprofits were facing was the issue of trust and accountability. So if this can be dealt with, you can end up getting a lot of support from the private sector. So there are just a few examples of the key private sector players which you can research at your own time, including Microsoft, which is very big. There's Google, there's Coca-Cola, IKEA, and of course, Safaricom has been very big in Kenya, and they have done a lot of projects. So that's just an example of private sector engaging in the social sector. There is companies, oil companies like Shell and even MasterCard. These are very big in the sector. So as a conclusion, I just want to share with you that it is very, very important that we acknowledge that both the private sector as well as the nonprofits have got a common goal or dream of driving social transformation. So the opportunity already exists, and therefore we need to harness that advantage. And therefore we also need to establish clear frameworks of collaboration, come up with ethical guidelines how we are going to collaborate, as well as communicate channels where you are going to be reporting the result of this collaboration. So I just want to challenge you, especially those who have not been used to engaging with the private sector, that take a look around. The private sector is not just the big international organizations in the capital city. It can also include a supermarket in the neighborhood. It can include a wholesale in the neighborhood. Go to them and they might support you. So thank you very, very much. And I'm happy to hear your experiences and even some questions. Thank you very, very much.